You know what? There's a new fashion trend out there, and I'm sure you're aware of it. All across America, Americans have been crying out for t-shirts filled with a plethora of Greek phrases. Well, you may think it's just a small part of society, but you know what? People everywhere are wearing them. It's a new fashion trend. How did New York miss it? We don't know. But you as an ETS student have an opportunity not only to wear one of these new fashion statements, but to understand what it means. So, without further ado, I'm going to take you on a tour of all the wisdom that can be contained simply using water-based ink and soft cotton t-shirts. So, let me show you the front design of our ETS t-shirt here. The front design is to reflect the conversation that we find in the great books. Throughout the great books, you will find that there are ideas that get pushed back and forth between the various authors, and these ideas come up again and again. The conversation that I wanted to show on the front of our t-shirt was the idea that redemption and creation are both combined in Christ. And so on the front of the t-shirt, you actually have a selection of biblical and great books readings. In very small print, yes, and if you want to read them all, you can read your t-shirt from beginning to end. But the selection starts out with Genesis 1:1. Genesis 1:1 begins by explaining that God is the creator of all things. He is the one who's made all of the world that we exist in. So after Genesis 1 through 3, then we go on to John 1. And in John 1, it says that in the beginning was the Word. Now, that beginning it's talking about is the beginning in Genesis 1, where God creates the world. And in John 1, it explains that when God created the world, He created it through the Logos, the Word. And that Word was Christ, which is particularly interesting because it explains that Jesus is the one through whom the world is made. Now, the importance of this comes out later in the readings on the t-shirt. Now, the next reading that we have is from Plato's Phaedrus. And in Plato's Phaedrus, Plato lays forth his understanding of salvation. Now, Plato's understanding of salvation comes from the notion that our problem is being attached to a body. And Plato holds the position that in order to be saved, we need to detach ourselves from that body and free ourselves of it. And so, when Plato dies, he says, we ought to offer a cock to Asclepius, meaning that he is going to give an offering to the healing God and thus declare himself cured. Why is he cured when he dies? Well, because he's getting rid of his body. This is the understanding of Platonic salvation. Now, following that, the next selection we have is from Lucretius. In contrast to Genesis 1, where it says God creates everything, Lucretius argues that nothing was ever created from nothing, meaning that matter itself is eternal and thus not created by God. So Lucretius puts forward what we call atomism or materialism, that everything is not created by God, but in fact simply eternally existent. Everything, therefore, that is in existence has come about through simply random chance. Well, following upon that Lucretius quote, at the end here we have the quotes of Athanasius. Now, Athanasius on the Incarnation argues very well that, in fact, to believe that everything is created simply by eternal matter through random chance does not account for the fact that the world that we live in is a supremely organized world. The world that we live in is a world that shows intelligent design. And so Athanasius argues that you have to admit the world around us is not a world that looks like the product of chaos. It is a world that is created by order, which is very interesting because the world Athanasius speaks of is the world of Christ, the world created through the Logos, which in Greek also means an order or a pattern or a rationality. So Athanasius goes back to John 1 and says, yes, it is created by the Logos. It is created by Christ, who has ordered all things so that the world that we live in is a place of great order and intelligence. And Athanasius goes on and then argues that this is why Jesus can save the world. This is why Jesus can enter the world and redeem it, is because he is the original creator. So in opposition to Plato, who says that the body is our problem, Athanasius says the body is not our problem, it's our sin nature that's a problem. Our body is God created, a blessing from God, something to be affirmed and believed in and held to. And it is Christ who is the source of our salvation. So, in this front of the t-shirt, what you're seeing is a little bit of what we call the Great Conversation. Authors talking back and forth to one another, exchanging ideas, going back and forth, and having this pole of ideas one against the other, wherein we find the great drama of intellectual history that we read about in great books. Now, on the back of the t-shirt, you have an opportunity for you to learn a little Greek. And this seal that you see here is actually the seal that is in our school floor. So that if you look at the general shape of the various circles, this is actually a shape that was created by actually Mr. Carr, and he copied it from a cathedral in Florence that was built in the 1400s. And so the basic shape here is very geometric, and I took that shape and filled it with all of the Greek phrases that we talk about in class. So the first one that you want to look at goes around the edge of the seal here, and it's John 3:16. Right here, it's utos gar agapisen o theos ton kosmon oste ton ion ton manocheni adoken inapas o pistevon isaf ton miapolite alechid zoin ionion. Now, if you want to memorize this, at the fling, we oftentimes do a military chant. You can say, utos gar agapisen o theos ton kosmon oste ton ion ton manocheni adoken inapaso pistevon isafton meapolite alechizoin ionion. So, say that back and forth in little phrases and you'll get that down. Now, in contrast to John 3:16, we have a question from Plato. And this is in the Euthyphro. This phrase here, it says, Ara ta osian oti osian estin phileta ipoton theon e oti phileto osian estin. This is a phrase from Plato's Euthyphro, and in Plato's Euthyphro, he asked the question, is the holy, because it is holy, loved by the gods, or because it is loved by the gods, is it holy? The question that he's asking here is whether or not the gods loving something makes it holy, or do they love it simply because it is already holy? Plato's answer to this question is that things are holy in themselves and the gods simply respond to it. Now, all of the other circles have phrases as well. I'll go around here. Start with this phrase right over here, and we're going to zoom in a little bit. All right, this little phrase right here, this phrase reads anthropos metron. The phrase means man is the measure. And this phrase we find in Plato's dialogue, the Protagoras. And this is the position put forward by one of his interlocutors. And the position simply means that all truth is determined by man's seeing of it. This is convincing when you take examples like whether or not it's cold or hot outside. Is it cold or hot outside? Well, it kind of depends on how it feels to us. Other things like truth, justice, and beauty, it's not so easy to see them that way, and Plato does a remarkably good job of showing why there must be absolute truths instead of simply believing that everything is dependent upon man's individual opinion. Other one over here that you see is ergon e meleon. Alas, a sorrowful work. This is a phrase from the Agamemnon, and after Agamemnon comes home from Troy and is slain by his wife, the chorus looks at what's happened to him, and this is what they say, alas, a sorrowful work. In the middle here, we have this ring, and this ring is to help you with your upper and lowercase alphabet letters in Greek. You see the alphabet just goes right around here, and that's to help you learn your upper and lowercase letters. All right, scrolling down here to these smaller phrases here. If you look in this circle right there, this one is actually also from the Bible. It says, En archi in o logos. In the beginning was the Word. And once again, this little term, logos, is very important to the history of Greek philosophy and the Bible, because this is the term that John takes in John 1 that has such a full meaning. To the Greeks, it was not just word, it was also argumentation, even mathematical ratio. And so when John says Jesus is the logos, he's hearkening back to a lot of those ancient Greek ideas of the unity and the order of the universe and linking them to Christ himself. Over here is a phrase that was found on the temple in Delphi, the temple of Apollo there. It's Enothi Saufton. And this is one of the great philosophic cries to know yourself. All philosophers need to begin with self-knowledge, to examine the human condition, to understand what it means to be human, to enter into a process that really is unique to human beings. None of the other animals examine themselves. They reflect upon their own nature. Man does that, and in doing it, there's a great amount of wisdom to be found. Christian theologians will take this up as well, that man needs to know himself, to know his sinful condition, to reflect well upon his place before God and the necessity of a redeemer for his sin. I come back up to the top here, and you'll notice in this large circle right here, we have a number of phrases. And here, let's take the first one, is pistis, elpis, agapi. Faith, hope, and love. And these are the spiritual virtues that are given in the scriptures. The next one is from Homer, rhododactylos ios. Rhododactylos ios means rosy-fingered dawn. And if you've read your Homer, you know how much he likes that phrase. The next one is actually a phrase that was written on Plato's Academy. It says, acheometritos midis isito. It simply means the non-geometer may not enter. Or in other words, geometers only. This was written over Plato's Academy because it was understood that in studying geometry, you prepare yourself for philosophic reflection. By looking at geometry, you become aware of the beauty of the universe, you see the pattern of reason that is there, and you become influenced by that and desire to order your own soul and to give it a pattern of virtue that would make it fit in with this beautiful world that is discovered through the reason of geometry. Over here is another phrase from Socrates, en ida oti uden ida. Socrates said, one thing I know that I know nothing. And this is the basis of Socratic wisdom, is to begin by knowing what you don't know. Very oftentimes as human beings, we're very confident about what we have to say. And so one of the first things we need to learn to do is understand that we don't know as much as we do. To have humility to admit what we do not know. The next is actually from Sophocles. And one of the lessons that Sophocles teaches over and over again is that in order to learn, you must suffer. Children don't stop touching the stove until they burn their finger on it. And then they don't touch it again. Well, if you suffer, you learn. And this seems to be the way we human beings do it. All right, and let's see, I've done that one already. The next one down here is utis and Odysseis. This is the little trick that Odysseus uses when he's in the cave of the Cyclops. He says, my name is nobody. And that is a pun on his name, Utis Odysseis. Both of those have a similar sound to them, but it's also a very important point about Odysseus' journey home. If he doesn't get back home, he will be a nobody. He will lose his relationship to his wife, his son, his home, his father. He will become a wanderer who has no friend, no companion, and no identity. The next phrase here is istapou idapos, and this is a little phrase that is spoken to Oedipus in the play Oedipus Rex. Oedipus thinks he knows a great deal, and yet he will discover very shortly that he doesn't know as much as he thinks he does, and that he is tragically mistaken about his identity. So, what do you know, Oedipus? Istapou idipos. Once again, a nice little play on his name. All right, coming down here, let me scroll down a little bit. And this phrase right here, anarchios de midzon uk estin kakon. This phrase here comes from the play Antigone, and it comes from the character Creon, who is very enamored of the importance of keeping a safe state. And so he expresses his own opinion that the greatest of all evils is anarchy, and therefore the greatest of all virtues is the protection of the state. The next phrase here, if you look over here, it says, tin evsevion sevisasa. Okay? It means honoring piety. This is how Antigone, Creon's antagonist, expresses her position, that what she does is for the sake of piety and for the observance of what God would have us to do. So rather than protecting the state, she protects her family and does what she believes is right in God's eyes. This finds the contradiction or the collision between the ideas of Antigone and Creon. Down here we have another phrase, Io Vasilev pose dakriso. This also comes from the play Agamemnon. When the chorus sees Agamemnon dead, they cry out, O king, how ought we to mourn you? Come over here, and now we have another phrase from Socrates. We start here. This phrase from Socrates, it says, To Asclepio a Philomen electriona. And that simply means, to Asclepius we ought to offer a cock. I explained a little bit of this before, but Asclepius was the god of healing. And when you got over a disease, you would always offer up a cock or a rooster to Asclepius. Well, right as Socrates dies, he says, we ought to offer a cock to Asclepius, meaning that he is cured. This comes about right as he dies, because at that point he loses his connection to a body and becomes simply a soul. All right, come over here, and here we have the first phrase of the Iliad. Meninae the thea Peleadio Achilles. Sing, goddess, the rage of Peleus' son Achilles. This phrase tells you the story of the Iliad. It is the story of Achilles' rage. That first word, menin, or rage, is the story of the Iliad. It is the story of Achilles' rage. The next is the story of the Odyssey. Here's the first line of the Odyssey. Maandra mi anepe musa. And that means, sing to me, muse the man. And that's the story of the Odyssey, is the story of the man Odysseus and his journey home. All right, I think I'm catching things here. I have to make sure I follow an orderly path or I get lost in all these circles. Let's go next to the Aristotelian virtues. See these phrases right here? These phrases are some of the Aristotelian virtues that he brings up in the Nicomachean Ethics. The first one here is megaloprepias. This is called great appearance. And for someone who has great wealth and has the ability to spend large sums of money, this is the virtue of knowing how to spend it well, knowing how to make a great appearance. The next is megalopsychia. Okay, this simply means big soul. It's actually the same meaning as the Latin word magnanimity. It means having a big soul, not being inclined towards petty things, but looking to those things that are big and grand. The next one here is oligopsychia. This simply means little soul. This is when you have the soul of a chipmunk. This is also the Latin word pusillanimity, okay? Small-souledness. When you find those things that don't matter are those things that concern you most. And over here we have vikiosini. This is also a word used in the Bible, righteousness, okay? All right, and let me get down to this one here. This is our Latin phrase, just so that Mr. Hendricks does not only think Greek is important. We have one Latin phrase here. It says, O hominis ad servitutem parato. It says, men fit for slavery. And this is actually what I think is the Emperor Titus says as he leaves the Roman Senate. The men in the Senate have shown themselves to be so servile, such kiss-ups, that he becomes disgusted with them. And even though he has oppressed them himself, he becomes so disgusted with the slave-like nature that these senators are showing that he says of them, free men simply fit to be turned to slaves. All right, come down here. Over on this side, we have ton men musikon phronimon. The musician is wise. I don't know why I like that phrase, but I just do. This phrase down here, chalepa ta kala, is very lovely. This is actually a very old Greek phrase. It's quoted in many of the Platonic dialogues, but it simply means that beautiful things are difficult. If you want to do things that are beautiful and lovely in life, it's going to take work and striving. Over here we have another nice old phrase, kina ta ton filon. The things of friends are common. This is actually very equivalent to the Spanish phrase, su casa es mi casa. When you are friends, you share your possessions. If you have somebody that you're continually squabbling with over who owns what, you can be pretty certain that's not a friend. When you have friends, you are open-handed and share the things that you possess. All right, let's come down next to the circle over here on the left, and it says imen emparia tihi pi ida aparia tihi. Okay, it says, on the one hand, experience begets art. On the other hand, inexperience, luck. Now, if you want to sit down at the piano and play the Moonlight Sonata by Beethoven, you're going to have to practice a long time and learn a great deal through experience. So, if you want to have the art of being able to be a good piano player, then you need to have experience, practice. On the other hand, if you happen to sit down at the piano and through your inexperience, the first time you sit down and play, you all of a sudden just happen to play the Moonlight Sonata, this is what we call luck. So you can either depend upon luck in life to get ahead, or you can look to experience and practice and develop your skills as we always have to. All right, the next phrase is a disconcerting phrase. This phrase actually comes from Plato's Phaedrus, and it comes from the second speech of love. And this speech describes love as defined as simply physical desire and shows where that type of love leads. This is the sort of love that simply leads one to devour the object of one's love, whether or not it is good for the beloved or not. I call this hamburger love. You destroy the hamburger in eating it because you desire it. You don't care if you keep the hamburger or not. You destroy it for your own good. Well, here this phrase is os liki an agapos os peda phi lusin erasta. As the wolf loves the lamb, so the lover loves the beloved. Okay? This is hamburger love. As a lover loves the object of his love, it's just like the way a wolf loves a lamb. He wants to devour the lamb and destroy it for his good. All right, come down here, and right here it says polo to phronin evdemonias proton iparchi. All right, it means by far wisdom is the greatest part of happiness. And this is from Sophocles, very lovely little phrase. In life, what brings us happiness most often is the ability to pursue life with wisdom. When we forsake wisdom, our lives are usually filled with pain, and that leads away from happiness into human misery. The next to look at are these tiny little circles here, and these tiny little circles give you, from Plato's Republic, the different forms of government. Okay? Here you see this little circle, aristokratia. This is aristocracy. Comes from the word aristos, meaning excellent ones. This is when excellent ones rule the city. The next is timokratia. This is when those who rule are those who have attained honor. Plato says that this would be a government where those who rule are those who have military honor. The next one is demokratia. It comes from demos, meaning the people. Once again, ruled by the people. Over here you have oligocharchia. Oligos means a few, and so it'd be ruled by a few. In the Republic, this means ruled by the wealthy few. And then you have the last form of government, tyrannis. Okay, tyrannis, and this is simply the word tyranny. This is the absolute rule by one individual who often turns the government for his own uses. And then right here we have the first word of the Republic, kateving. Just like in the Iliad, you have minin is the story about going and telling about Achilles' rage. Here in the Republic, the story is about going down, kateving. Going down and having to encounter the ignorance of those who believe in shadows rather than are lifted up to the vision of truth found through the pursuit of philosophy. All right, and I think that's it. So, I hope you enjoy your t-shirt, and I hope you will read it often and answer all the questions people ask you about what it all means.